So, welcome. I'm Bolboacă. I will talk to you briefly about Agile transformations. I have been doing this for a while. I don't know, 4 or 5 years. I don't know exactly. I don't remember. A long time. And I'd like to share my ideas about Agile transformations. If you have questions, please raise your hand, shout, or whatever, okay? So if you have any questions whenever during this talk. Mainly, I created this talk for you if you are in these roles, like you're a manager, you're a scrum master, you're a person who is dealing with an Agile transformation, or if you don't know exactly if you'll need this or because it's not very clear in this moment for you. Also, if you are in a management position and you have many Agile coaches in your organization who are transformation coaches, that's another way of viewing this. Also, I will talk about when to use this Agile transformation, when it makes sense, when it doesn't make sense. And this is more or less about an agent of change. I have 7 points, starting from a bit of what is Agile and what is not Agile. Why transition to Agile? That means maybe you have a reason to transition, and I will tell you my reasons. And also when not to transition to Agile, that's also there. About change management, and especially about Agile change management, how to track progress, and then some things about transparency and how to say I'm done with this transition. So how many of you are or have been during an Agile transformation process in the past? Raise your hands. Okay, so more or less half of you. Okay, so ask questions, please. What is not Agile? I keep hearing these things, these words, Agile methodology. It doesn't make sense, okay? Agile is basically a paper, let's say, with 4 ideas and 12 values. That's not a methodology. A methodology is something thick that has a lot of details about how to implement it and so on. So if you want to go to Agile because you want to change from a methodology to another methodology, you got it wrong. It's not a fixed recipe. You will probably need to adjust. And even though people keep saying about our model, their model, the other model, they are models, they're not recipes. So there are all these frameworks now that exist in the market. And don't take them as recipes. Take them as models. It's not a golden standard. Agile works in some areas, doesn't work in other areas. So you need to think if you want to go there. It's very important. And we'll talk when and how it's important. It's not a silver bullet. Okay? It's not the only solution for all the problems in the world, especially for software. Again, you need to think about when it's suitable. And it's not a religion, because I keep saying that people start promoting it like it's a religion. And I keep hearing more and more about Agile evangelists, which is weird, because it was quite the opposite. It's a free thing, a free movement where we kind of talk about how to improve. So what is it? It's a set of principles of values. And we keep talking about collaboration, communication, feedback, quality. Maybe we want to be closer to our customers and to our users. And it has a lot to do with adaptability and fast change, where a methodology isn't really helping. With Agile, we change our methodology weekly, probably. So that's why if you have a fixed methodology, it doesn't have to do anything with Agile. And to some extent, in the late years, maybe starting, I don't know, 2013 or something like that, Agile has started to be a philosophy of business. So we extended the idea of Agile from the core of software to the a wider area of marketing, sales, maybe to the areas of budgeting, and to other areas of the business. So that means that we start seeing Agile as a philosophy of business. Now, why would you like to transition to Agile? The most common thing I hear is we want to transition to Agile because we want to reduce time to market. Because we have this big legacy code, and now if we want to add the feature, it takes us 1 year or 2 years. And that's not possible because other startups came on the market or the other companies changed their way of working, and now they can deliver the same feature in 3 weeks. So that's one of the most common ideas. Also, we must reduce the cost of development because especially in big markets like, let's say, banking or in areas like automotive, companies cannot afford to have these big costs on software development anymore. It's just how the business and the market evolved. So they want to reduce the costs of development. That means basically reducing waste. So making sure they do the same thing, but with less waste, less unproductive work. Some other companies say we want better relationship with clients and users. That happens especially with medium or smaller companies who are connected with the business. They sell directly, so it's business to consumer or startup kind of business sometimes even. Another thing is that companies want to go back to focusing on the value they add. Because initially they were doing this, but they just moved from there, and they don't have so much sales anymore. And another reasons why people asked me to help them with Agile transformation was to increase the quality, especially the technical quality of the product. Why? Because, well, this is another type of change where people from the core engineering side come and say, we want to have a better business case to our managers when we want to refactor the system or when we want to re-architect things. We want to be better at our job. We want to be happier with the software we produce. I also see these other cases when companies want to transition to Agile. And the most common is management heard it's cool. They read in Harvard Business Review or some of these business magazines and they say, yeah, it's the thing to do. Come on, just do it. What do you need? I saw that you need to go to a workshop, maybe not all of you, you're 100. So 10 of you will go to a workshop, you'll teach the others, and then you're done, you're Agile. So that's very common, and it's very unfortunate because the complexity of a change is quite bigger. Also, it's not a good moment to start transitioning when you are in a busy period. You need to deliver, or you are 100% focused on delivery. If you don't do that, you'll go bankrupt, or you'll diminish your sales dramatically. This happens quite often when companies come to me and they say, we want to transition to Agile. And they say, but we don't have time. So that's not the good moment. You either do something to minimize this bottleneck, or you maybe want to acknowledge that you lose some money while doing this. So just say no to some clients. But doing a transition when you're 100% hands-on doesn't work. Never works. Also, there are some companies that want to do this and they really understand why, but they don't have enough budget. And that happens either because they don't know how to ask for it, or it's just because the company isn't there. So then it's the problem of either trying to make more money and do this in small iterative steps, or another way is, well, just to make a better business case to your management. And also there are these cases where I go and they say, okay, we need to transition to Agile, we have 3 months or something like that, but nobody knows what this Agile thing is. This is very difficult, and because understanding the whole mindset takes a while, and especially with people who are used with working in a certain way, it's very difficult to get them to understand a totally different mindset. So again, it's about time. You need to allocate time for absorbing this information. When to transition to Agile? I typically talk about benefits and risks, because any transition has risks. And quite often, managers don't get this, and it's weird, because managers should do risk management. And too often they have this very positive approach, everything will work fine. And that's not going to happen. Usually something doesn't work well. And you need to have this buffer of budget or this buffer of time to make sure you will use it in that moment. But if you want to go to Agile, basically this is why I would like to go to Agile, to improve my time to market, improve the quality of the product, because I'm talking about products here, not about anything else, because Agile started from product-based companies. And what we want to focus is on business and on product. Everything else just supports the product and the business. The technical side, in any of the initial Agile ways, was just a way to support a better delivery of a product. So it's engineering to support business. And then minimize waste. That's another benefit, because you'll focus on what you need to do, because you'll increase transparency, and because people will communicate better, you'll have less bottlenecks, less handoffs. So all these benefits will increase, in fact, the time to market. Also, besides the thing that a lot of managers don't understand that it's very possible things will go bad, there is a kind of this unwritten rule that typically in between 10 and 25% of an organization will leave after an Agile transformation. Agile is not for everyone. Not everyone likes to talk each day about what they've done, to talk, to retrospect, to communicate, and we need to think about these things. Sometimes some people leave just because they hate this, and it's fine. But sometimes people leave because we didn't do a good job in the transformation, and that's not fine. We really need to think that specialists that are very good at their job might have points on not changing certain ways of the company, and we need to listen to them. We don't want to lose those specialists. Also, a lot of specialists that have a very clear acquired knowledge will also typically work alone. And it's very difficult for them to move from working alone to working with a team. And that's why they will leave. We need to understand also the social aspect of these companies. People are working and they have relationships, and if you have these vertical silos and you break them, then you'll break their relationships because they won't be able to meet each other, and that's very important. So you need to understand how to manage that as well. So that's very important when you structure the teams. Some people hate each other and they don't want to work together, so don't put them in a team, because then you'll lose probably 2-3 months of therapy with that team until you break it up. So there are all these problems. Also, a lot of specialists are introverts, and introverts don't like to talk a lot. and you need to understand how to help them work in a certain way, and how much talking to do, and when to stop the talking and go to work, and leave them be in a corner rather than put them in an open space. So all these are very specific problems that we need to tackle, also from the social and psychological point of view. Agile transformation is not a process that goes directly to the spot. You don't know exactly where you'll go. You might have a setup in your head where you want to go, but bear in mind that that setup might not be the case, because maybe it's very probable that you won't reach there, you'll reach somewhere else. That's why don't be focused on going there, but rather be focused on the values and principles, and especially on these benefits, reducing the time to market, improving the code quality, improving the feedback of the users. That's a lot more important. Rather, all the rest, the process, is just subject to change. Even though we have a plan in our mind, it's very probable that it won't happen like that. So if you have a very fixed mindset, it's very difficult to go to this approach. When is Agile working very well? In product development companies, because you have users who are closer, you have clients that are closer, and you can get feedback faster so that you can improve your processes faster. You can see the lead time, and you can see their happiness, and that will probably increase also the revenue. Also, it's very important to understand that when you have these type of horizontal teams, they will need to work together in a cross-functional way. So that's another reason to transition to Agile, but when they can do that easily. I very often see that the code and the architecture, and based on Conway's law, it's very difficult to change all the organization because everything is like stuck like that on horizontal layers, and you have architects specialized, and the knowledge is only there. It doesn't get in between the layers. So moving those horizontal layers to vertical layers that support business is very difficult sometimes. So you need to do some changes before trying to transition to Agile. And that basically means a lot of workshops on spreading the knowledge of business and of technical knowledge, architectural knowledge, testing knowledge, and so on. It's very important to have a good understanding of Agile from the management, from the teams, and so on. So they will understand what's going on, why they want to do this, why do we want, what's the purpose of these things. Very often I see that, we're starting to use Scrum. Okay, why? I don't know, someone asked this. This is a very big problem, and it's a transformation smell. Another smell I see is trying to transform all the very big organizations at once. You have 1,000 people or 800 people, and you want to transform everyone at once. It doesn't really work like that. After that, you might say, yeah, we're done, but in fact, you're not done. You'll need to do another big transformation program, and another one, and another one. Rather try to see how it works on a small scale and try to expand it. It's always experiment, see how it works, come to a conclusion, try to broaden it a bit, see how it works in other teams, broaden it, and so on. So it starts to be like a plague, you know, introduce a germ and then it starts spreading. Agile change management. That's very important. It's one of the most important things in a transition, to understand how much change an organization can absorb, how much in an interval of time, how often you can ask for these changes. It's very, very important to have a very fine sense of smell of these ideas. Of course, we need to be, because we talk about Agile, we need to be very transparent. And I'll talk a bit later about a roadmap that I use for transformations. We need to be very clear why we do this, how, why do we try this, what are the next steps. Any ambiguity will generate a pressure on the transformation coach and will generate a lot of animosity from the teams. So that's not a good idea. It's preferred to stop if something is not very clear from the beginning, and just do that when it's very clear. So just put it aside. When doing change management, we're not managers. We need to listen. We need to have a lot of conversations. We are more people who get information rather than distribute information. We need to take all this information from all the concerned parties, from all the stakeholders, and then in a neutral way explain how we could do this with the experience we have. So a decision needs to be made together with everyone. Of course, it's always the case that some people will be pro and some people will be against. If you have a majority of people against it, that change won't happen. We work with very smart people who know how to say yes and do no. So it's very, very important to make sure they want to do this. I said here, be neutral. It's very important to show that, to show and to care for everyone the same in all the transformation. In any company, like in any social system, you will have maybe groups that fight. And then if you show that you work more with some and less with others, you'll have fights. And they will consider that you like them more than the others. Even if it's not the case, you need to make sure that's not the case and to show that's not the case. This is the most important thing. How much change can be absorbed? Very often I see transitions that are made very fast. They say, in 3 sprints, everything will be fine. It doesn't work like that. For some companies, it works in a month. For others, you need 2 years. So there is this absorption of change that needs to happen, and you need to observe the signs when it's too much. So you can push a bit more, and if people start saying, no, 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 we cannot do this, or you see that they don't really like it, you need to stop. And you always need to have this process of learning, then, so you teach them, you become a teacher, then you start helping them, you start being a coach, and then you go back and you just observe. So for every type of change you introduce. And after the change is internalized to every person, you'll be able to introduce more change and the next step. These steps need to have a meaning, what you start with and how you continue. You need to have a very natural way of changing. And they need to see the connection between them. How do we measure progress? This is weird. This isn't metrics. It's not KPIs. Most of them are observations. So that's why a transition coach needs to be very good at observing things and understanding from body language to the tone of the people you talk with, and also from things that are said, of course. That is easier. But what I look at are these things. Micromanagement transforms to self-organization. So how much micromanagement do we still do? until we have complete self-organized teams and complete self-organized organizations, we have a lot of stages. And we can see how much energy is added into micromanagement. Business knowledge, okay, product owners, stuff like that. When I hear our product owners are in Canada, but we're agile, this doesn't work like that. When I hear we don't know what to do this sprint because we don't have an idea on the business we need to implement, that shows we're not yet there. No matter if we have a product owner here near the team or we don't, it's important that the team knows how to develop that certain thing and they have the business knowledge. Because Agile is about product development and it's about business. It's not about anything else. Then technical quality. Is this improving? Is it better? You can measure this. Okay, this is very easy. You can look at different KPIs. Lead time of features, that's another thing. That means you can measure it as well, okay? From when the feature was requested until you put it in production. Team happiness, you can measure this as well. Feedback from clients as well, you can measure it. But then that's very important. If management trusts more the team and puts less pressure, it means you're better into the transformation. But transparency. From this point of view, I think it's very important to show what you're doing, what you're working now, and what all the team is working, all the teams are working now. It's important to explain the values. Again, I'm talking about clarity and a lot of communication. In one-on-one meetings, I don't want to do anything but ask for information. I have weekly meetings with management to explain the progress. That's another type of transparency. And retrospect. Very often there are things you think might work, but they don't, with all the experience possible. They just don't. So retrospect, see what worked and what doesn't work in that specific organization. That's a kind of a roadmap I use. I have a backlog where anyone can add things. We do a big brainstorming with everyone at the beginning. But then we put in these 3 stages. Now, in the near future, soon, a bit later, meaning, I don't know, more than 2-3 sprints, or depends on the case. And later, these are things that aren't very clear. There are things that are blocked, or things that are blocked by the actions we didn't do now. So, and of course, it's a priority. It looks like a Kanban board, more or less. Another thing to watch for is when is it over. Sometimes we linger too much on the transition. And that happens because we don't start with the objectives. So that's why we need to have objectives from the beginning. If we have management by objectives, we look at them, we discuss them with the management, and then they say, okay, we're done. Enough. We invested enough. Also because of, any team can pass through these stages of forming, storming, norming, and performing. When the teams reach a performing state, you can say it's done. Also, what I told you about later is that the management lets the team self-organize. That means they will be able to work on whatever they want, and the request will be in terms of what we need, not in terms of how you implement this or how we want this to do. This is a measurement of self-organization. There are some cases when Agile has minimal benefits. When we don't have a very dynamic business, or we know exactly what to develop. Where there are some cases where waterfall really works, where nothing can change because we don't have a dynamic market and so on. So it doesn't make sense to do an Agile transformation in that case. It's just money thrown out the window. When we don't have feedback from customers or users, if you don't have that, how do you know how to improve? So that's a very big problem in a lot of organizations. When you don't have people who want to collaborate, that's another case. If the business just wants to do this because it's cool, and they don't want to focus on high quality, that's a very big problem, and quite often happens. And very often, companies look at minimizing costs and not on doing investment on continuous improvement. If you look, well, this is expensive, but you don't look how much money I could earn from this. This is just a type of management that's not suitable with Agile. So that's just cost management. There are some anti-patterns I observed. The most common is we're special, this won't apply to us. And no one is that special, really. Every time I hear this, after a while, they will understand this can work. Not in a fixed way, but maybe you adjust it to some extent. When you have on these horizontal slices, companies working on horizontal slices that are, as I told you before, they're very fixed and they know exactly what they're doing. They don't have communication in between. It's very difficult to do that. And if you say we transition to Agile, but we have a front-end team and a framework team and so on, that's not Agile. It doesn't have anything to do with Agile. Transition a big organization at once, as I told you, it's a bad thing. Sometimes it's very risky also for the business. You could just go bankrupt if you do this. And yeah, it's about business knowledge. Agile, again, if you don't distribute business knowledge, that's bad. And it really doesn't work because everyone needs to self-organize. They cannot self-organize if they don't have knowledge. It's easy. If a manager takes decisions, that's again a bad thing instead of letting the team self-organized. And very common these days, in the last 1 or 2 years, I see transition manager as a role. So it's very weird to say that we are Agile transition managers while we're Agile. Doesn't make sense. So one thing I want to leave you with, if you want to transition to Agile, understand everything around you and do it right if you want to. Do it right with people that understand what change is and what transitioning means. Don't just do it like that, and we'll see what we do after. It's just bad preparation, and it will harm you. It will be difficult. What's next? We can discuss after that at open space. I recommend you to read a lot about change management and, well, Agile if you want. There are also books on Agile change management nowadays and Agile transitioning. You can attend a workshop on how to transition to Agile if you want. And if you have questions, that's my email. You saw it in the first slide as well. So yeah, that was all from me. Thank you.